Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Let's Talk ABM with me, Declan, CMO of account-based marketing agency Strategic ABM. ABM is one of the hottest B2B strategies right now, helping companies to win, grow and retain their most important accounts. This podcast allows me to spend some time talking to account-based marketing leaders about their ABM programs and share their insights with other B2B marketers, wherever you are on your ABM journey. So today I'm joined by Rachael Tiow, Director of ABM at Auth0. Rachael, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Declan, and it's been such a pleasure that we've been going back and forth, so I appreciate your patience with my schedule.
No, not at all. Just obviously Rachael is based at the moment out in Hawaii, and obviously I'm based in Madrid, so it's about 12 hours difference between us. So it's been quite difficult trying to coordinate a time. And obviously I think it's early morning for you and it's late evening for me. So that's the beauty of being able to connect, and this kind of podcast series is just great to kind of meet people like you, Rachael. So thanks for being so generous and agreeing to take part. So let's just kick off with a question, Rachael. I believe that obviously we mentioned Hawaii. I believe that you're a keen surfer, and we were talking earlier about Mick Fanning, who's quite a famous Australian, I believe, surfer. Let me ask you a question. You meet him in a lift, or as you Americans say, an elevator. How would you explain to him in between 2 or 3 floors very quickly what Auth0 do?
Yeah, so I follow him on Instagram, so I'm sure he logs on to Instagram because he's quite active on there. And I'll just say to him, Auth0 is a tool that makes it very simple for you to log into any application and to keep your identity safe, because ultimately Mick Fanning doesn't want to lose his credit card information to a malicious actor.
Well, that's a very simple, beautiful way of explaining the company and your kind of unique selling proposition. And in terms of the kind of clients that you would go after and the customers that you have, who is your ideal customer?
I would say our ideal customer are in the B2B, B2C, also government or public sector. The way I like to think about it is, as long as you have a login box, we ought to be having a conversation. I guess the whole entire world, pretty much, at this point, in a very digital world that we have. Anyone that has any trouble with trying to figure out their login, authentication, authorization, we ought to have a conversation.
And does that span across SME, SMB, mid-market, enterprise, the whole range?
Yes. Yeah, the whole range. And I'm not speaking about this because I feel that I feel extremely egotistical about Auth0 or Okta now that we have been now that we've merged. It's just a very key component to a lot of businesses today. An example, I just logged onto Honolulu Cookies for any one of us who's listening to this podcast today and they love butter cookies. Check out Honolulu Cookies. I don't get paid for them, but I was just on there and they have a login box. It's a B2C company where everyday people like us are logging in to buy cookies. They have a login box, and we ought to have a conversation because sometimes the authentication pieces can be so cumbersome for a developer to build that we actually already have building blocks for them. So again, I'm speaking about it from a perspective of, as a customer of many businesses, I see the value in it, and it's very rare to be working for a company where we're delivering real life value to businesses and their customers as a whole. So yes, across the whole board, if there's businesses out in the cosmos and the aliens need authentication services, please give us a ring as well.
Give you a ring. Okay. So let's start talking about ABM and the ABM program that you run there.
Yeah.
I believe that we were speaking a couple of months back in preparation for this interview, and you mentioned that I think the whole ABM journey started kind of the back end of 2016. You had a very strong inbound marketing machine. You developed an outbound team, and then ABM was the kind of natural next step for you. Can you talk us through that evolution?
Yeah. So as you've beautifully recapped, Auth0 being a product-led product led and a product growth company, we spent a lot of time with the inbound elements of the business, and also naturally with the persona that we wanted to work with. They didn't really want to talk to sales, and I'm of the belief that if you have something valuable to offer, people will want to talk to you. So I challenged that, I guess, hypothesis and decided to let's test outbound. By outbound, I meant sales prospecting, because that's the background that I am very, very strong in, and that's where I started out in my tech career. And we started seeing results. So that then led us to having a deeper discussion with, at that time, Carrie, who was our senior director of demand gen, and my boss at the time, to figure out, okay, something is working. Where do we go? How else do we evolve? And Carrie has put together some really beautiful targeted demand gen programs where they're very ABM centric. At that time, we called it direct mails. And that's where it all started. Was I tested out the hypothesis on, nope, it's not correct. If you have something valuable to say, people will take a call with you. That led me to building the first outbound sales team at Auth0. That gave me the opportunity to actually pair up with Carrie very closely on the direct mail programs that she put together. And then through a very strange turn of events, I never ever thought that I'd ever end up in marketing, because I think there's always this, from an egotistical perspective, I believe that we think that marketing is where all the lousy salespeople end up. And I definitely had my own fair share of identity crisis when I moved over to marketing. And that's so not true. But just through a very, I guess, in a way now, in hindsight, a very serendipitous change of events that led me to joining Carrie's team and carrying on the baton for, hey, let's put together programs for outbound sales prospecting. And direct mail over a period of time evolved into account-based marketing. Oops, that was the pop of a lid.
and just a question I ask a lot of people, actually, because there's a lot of talk on LinkedIn about this. But in terms of demand generation versus ABM, where do you sit? How do you see the two coexisting together?
Yeah, I think it's, I think we live in a world where people like to draw very clear lines or clear swimming lines, as in you stay in lane 1 and you stay in lane 2 and you shouldn't be cross-functionally. I mean, yeah, of course that makes sense if we're swimming in the Olympics, but this is work, right? It's people. The way I think about ABM and demand gen is it's actually an ecosystem. And every company is very different. At Auth0, what we've actually done is demand gen is ABM team. We have our events team, we have growth, we have digital, and there is a couple more. But those are the big few companies that we have, teams that we have. And we collaborate very closely on programs. The number one thing that we focus on is the regional pipeline number. So then the question is, how do we deploy programs or mobilize programs that will generate the outcome? So if demand gen is the overarching umbrella, say it's the house that puts all these teams together, then truly it's just a matter of trying to figure out who starts first, where do we then meet up next, where and when do we pass the baton. At the end of the day, how do we win the damn race? So that's the ecosystem, and that's how we've actually evolved at Auth0.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense in terms of being in the game together as a company, and obviously the various aspects of marketing and sales that are working together, but ultimately we're all trying to win the right type of business, which I think is really important in terms of going back to the ICP question, the right type of business for the company, and obviously in the most efficient manner possible, and winning accounts that you want to win, and then obviously then retaining those accounts,
Definitely.
which obviously ABM is perfectly suited for. I know that you're a great believer in experimentation, and I know that you mentioned before that there's a real culture of experimentation at Auth0. Did that really help you to test and succeed with your ABM program?
Yes, it has. Actually, before we if you don't mind, before we dive into the experimentation, may I share a very quick 30-second cap on how ABM actually interact and collaborate across demand gen at Auth0? So I'll give this example. Now, I'm not sharing this because I'm not sharing this because we're perfect, right? I think when we have a lot of people moving with, I love how one of our leaders on the digital team says, we have big brains and big personalities. So when we have big brains and big personalities, and thankfully not big egos, we have a lot of ideas and we're trying to figure out what the heck should we do. And we experimented with this earlier this quarter was, hey, why not we start with, we use 6 Sense, love 6 Sense. Again, saying this not because I get paid by them, but we have intent data from 6 Sense. We know what our target accounts are that's picked by the sales team. Why don't we kick off with an ABM program? It's specifically targeted to B2B and B2C. And because it's summer and at that time, a few months back, a lot of states were opened up. So we actually sent a direct mail of a grill kit to sort of, hey, welcome to summer. Just as grilling, you need to find your right set of tools and gears. You have to do the same with identity as well. So we kicked off the quarter with a direct mail across all these accounts. Typically, what I've observed is when accounts go through a program, they kind of just end, 4, 6 weeks, 8 weeks in, nothing happens. To those that didn't respond, they kind of just stop there. So we said, hey, why don't we continue taking these accounts and prospects through our Auth0 program? So we started to collaborate on, okay, what is it that the events team can do? Oh, let's host an Auth0 hosted event for a grill. We call it the Pit Master class. So the first batch of people, about 15 to 20% responded. Great. What about the 80%? We shouldn't leave our prospects hanging. That's how I'm thinking about it. So we then moved those balance of 80% into the Pitmaster event, invited them. All right, now we have 80%. Maybe 20% of that 80% responded. And I know the math is not equal, but let's just say now we're down to 60%. What do we do with them? Well, we have webinars. Great, let's invite them to the webinar. Now that falls under the events team as well. Also, I forgot to mention, digital team is actually involved because they provide air coverage and signaling that, hey, it's Auth0. Depending on where they're at in the journey, we have different contents that we're pushing out at them so that there's always something valuable for them to learn about Auth0. So it's a give-get kind of relationship. And then we also have our developer marketing, and that's something that we're working very closely on. Okay, well, what about all this stuff that we do with developers? How do we get our prospects, those from those targeted accounts? And targeted doesn't have to be the only ones that are picked by sales. We have the intent data. So we have a lot of accounts. So we then move them into their different channels of engagements with us. So that's a concrete way of how ABM has evolved, how we do ABM here at Auth0, which is how do we collaborate? Because we can't win by ourselves, right? There's a quote or proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with a team. And I can safely say that the team at Auth0 is here to make a dent in the universe. So that's just an example.
That's a great proverb, really, and it explains a lot actually about how companies are trying to bring that alignment together, really, and to remove those silos and particularly ABM is a great unifier of removing those kind of sales and marketing. And even indeed within the same marketing department, removing those silos. So back to that original question, I thought was quite relevant really for you. That culture of experimentation, which I know you were very keen to talk about before, that's something that's at the heart of your organization, right?
Yes, yes, it's deeply embedded into our culture. I mean, I think ultimately in life, if we don't, there's so much that we can translate from life into work. And if we don't try new things in our lives, we kind of stay stagnant. It's the same with a lot of our programs, right? If I can give an example that we tried was, I'm not sure if there's anyone here listening that are board game fans of board games. So we thought, hey, you know what? Authentication is so critical to a business, and so many people are involved on a team when it comes to authentication. it's really difficult to figure out exactly who owns the whole project. So we then decided, hey, maybe if we go to LinkedIn and we get, some images, we figure out who those developers are and the org chart, and we print out their pictures and we send them the Guess Who board game. And we remove all those. I have never played Guess Who before, but they remove all those individuals and put the company's org chart on the board. It sounds great. That didn't go anywhere. That program failed. Not because the idea is not good. Sometimes the idea is too good for our own good, pretty much. So we learned, okay, that was a lot of work. It was very complex, and people probably thought it was creepy that we printed images of their team and put it on the game. So we then tried something even simpler. And then we thought, let's send them a lock. It started out with a kind of like a chest that we purchased, and it has a little lock on there. And inside that lock was a little bit, was a swag. I can't remember what it was. Yeah, it was a gift card. And the idea behind this was authentication. To get into your application, which is a swag or something that you want, you have to unlock the box. So you have to unlock your login box. So we thought, oh, that's a great idea. Super simple. It was easy, way easier than the first board game. And that was a hit. People loved it. So we started experimenting. Okay, what are different ways that we can send locked items to people? So we started with that locked chest. Then it started to change into maybe what if we packaged our swag in an envelope and then put it in a clear box. So it's kind of like a tease. It's like, I see there's something in there, but fuck, I can't get to it. What is it? That was a hit. And then over a period of time, we started to standardize, because I used to work at Apple, and one thing that's super important to Apple is your customer's experience. So then I started to think, hey guys, this was all fun ideas. How do we make that direct mail piece, outside of the fact that we have all that data on targeting, messaging, and customer prospect journey? How do we really enhance their experience of receiving that box that is congruent to our brand? And that's also another round of experimentation, and that just took off over a period of that. This is like a span of 3 to 4 years. It's not something that just happened overnight, but that shows a lot of learnings. Like, okay, this is good. That's not good. Let's remove that. Oh, that was really unpleasant. Let's not do it again. So it was a lot of trial and error. And the good news is, because at that time our VP of marketing was Gonto, and he's huge. Coming from a developer background, for him it's all about testing and experimentation. So between him and Gonto and Carrie, their consistent message to us has always been, out of 100 ideas, 99 of them are gonna suck. So might as well, let's experiment, and we're not gonna penalize you if your ideas suck. So let's keep on trying until we find that one golden goose egg. So there's experimentation of new ideas. There's experimentation or evolution of the same idea. So that's one. And I mean, in terms of results, our direct mail and ABM programs as a whole contributes to 20 to 30% at a minimum of our regional pipeline. So again, we can't do this alone. It's a huge team effort.
Well, I mean, that's just the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and that just shows you that the success through coming through that experimentation is just showing that failing is okay, as long as you learn from that failure and how you then take that failure forward. And that's, I think that developer world, technology world, is definitely one where people are more willing to test and to see what's going on, really. Let's talk about brand. There was an expression that when we were talking before that really kind of captured my imagination when we were talking, which was around, I think the quote that you said was, "Our job is not to sell, but to make prospects say, 'Tell me more.'" Yeah, and that was, and that I just thought that just, tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's something that I learned when I first started my career as a sales development rep. Our job is not to sell the product or the service. Our job is to pique the curiosity of our prospects, to go, that's interesting, so that I can get their attention. Because the most important thing that if we think about it from a very process-oriented journey, what has to happen for a call to take place? We have to pique their curiosity, get their attention, and a commit of time. If I can't get them to commit to a time, no amount of me showing banner ads and Mick Fanning and all this popular people singing the praises of Auth0 is going to make them have a talk or a call with us. So that is something that I've learned from my prospecting days, from my sales days, and how I engage with my prospect when I was in sales all the time. My first thing is, how do I pique your curiosity and get your attention? And once I have it, how can I change your perspective? Because a lot of us show up. I'm confident to say a lot of people that are listening to your podcast, they have been on both sides of the table. They have been both the prospects and probably somewhat of a seller, right? And we play those roles all the time. If for us to show on a call, it's because something that the salesperson said or something that the marketing team did changed your perspective about something that you are thinking about. And that's very important, especially on ABM, or I would even argue all of outbound, whether you're in sales or marketing. It's not to sell the product. It is really to pique someone's curiosity, change their perspective so that we can get them to say, let me commit 30 minutes to have a talk with your sales team, because let's not all forget, time is not a renewable energy. Time is irrecuperable. So if I'm going to give you 30 minutes of my time, how are you going to make me smarter and make my life better? Pretty much is like, don't fucking waste my time. So that's how I think about ABM prospecting outbound.
Yeah, and I think the whole idea around ABM, which is kind of, raising awareness, piquing people's interest, showing them not to be led by the product, but to be led by what does it mean for me? To show me you know me, show me that you're actually able to understand my business. Correct. And you're not just saying, hey, buy this solution, buy this authentication, buy this new technology, but actually, what does it mean for me? And I think that's something that, with the work that you're doing there and the work that other great ABMers are doing as well, they're definitely moving the dial in terms of showing that the client almost as well, if not better than the client knows themselves, really. Obviously, we mentioned earlier that we mentioned earlier that your ABM program now is around about 5 years old now, starting in 2016 or the tail end of 2016. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of learning. What do you think's been your greatest learning over that period?
I love that question because I don't have a knee-jerk answer to it. So I got to dig in my brain. I would say the first thing is be open to collaboration. Be open to listening. I'm suspecting that perhaps, I think there are two paths that a lot of marketers have. They are purely from a marketing background, so they have never sold. They haven't had an official title that says that they are in sales. And then you have those where they did some sales, not for them, they transitioned over to marketing. I think one key thing that I've learned, despite the fact that ABM is somewhat like my baby, is that you have to really understand that sales and marketing are just two wings on a bird and two wheels on a cart. And when you can embody that, you start to realize that for marketing to be effective and proficient and efficient in what they do, you have to embody somewhat of a sales mindset, whether it's the sales rep themselves or the sales leader. Why that's the case is because sales will be your largest internal customer. Then the other thing is for any salespeople or sales leader listening to the call is, number one, your marketing counterpart is not your EA. We're not here to serve you. We're here to serve all of our greater good, which is to generate pipeline and to generate revenue. So you have to also contribute. Now, that is two big things that I've seen, I've observed. In terms of what I've also learned is marketing is also a little bit this fluff. It's like you can't go to school for marketing, just as you can't really go to school for sales. You got to do marketing, you got to do sales. That's also another big thing that I've learned. And what that means is a lot of people will have a lot of great ideas. The question is, are you going to temper or tame the ego and your pride and just listen? A lot of my ideas are not even mine. A lot of it is I'm cruising at REI and we have an idea of, hey, why not let's collaborate with REI and see if we can do an event. Or I'm not a big fan of drinking, so let's not do more cocktails and conversation. There's got to be people like me, and we started testing out with a terrarium event. Or also getting feedback on, hey, Rachel, your idea is not that great, but we're going to test with something else, but we're going to take one element of your idea. That's fine too. So I would say it goes back to experimentation. It goes back to teamwork or collaboration. I would say, So those are 3, maybe 4 or 5 things that I've learned being in marketing, not so much specifically ABM.
I think there's 3 or 4 great learnings, to be honest, and I think they can be very much used by anybody listening to this podcast or any ABMer looking to be a better marketer, a better ABMer. Let's just talk about ROI, which obviously is a hot topic when people are talking about ABM.
Yeah.
What do you measure? What do you look out for in your programs? What are you looking to measure in terms of looking for the success of your ABM program?
Dollar bills. That's so we measure SQO numbers, we measure pipeline dollars, because we know by this point we have a pretty consistent, somewhat predictable, well, I should say it's pretty predictable at this point, how much of the revenue that we generate or influence will get flipped to revenue. So the eye on the prize is SQOs.
And that's obviously in terms of both the pipeline and the actual invoiced revenue that you're seeing from the campaigns.
Yeah, so we do actually look at revenue as well. But in terms of what's the first thing that we have to pay attention to, and what we all talk about, we always have vanity metrics. Makes us look good. Hey, leads. I don't care if you got me 300 leads from the same damn company. If none of them are going to flip to an SQO, who the hell cares? We didn't talk to the right person. So SQO's pipeline is key. Once we know that, we have a pretty predictable conversion over to revenue, and we keep track of that too, because we're so closely integrated with sales. It's impossible to not be focused on revenue. And I think I don't know if this is something that is unique to Auth0, but it's something that I love just because I come from a sales background. Just being at previous companies, and I'll hear marketers talk about leads. That's great. But I find that when teams can actually unite and not measure just on vanity metrics, but really have metrics that both sides of the coin, right, are looking into, it creates more accountability. There's check and balance. And more minds come together, look at the same thing. You just get better results that way. So for us, the number one thing is pipeline, SQOs, and of course revenue.
No, I love that around the vanity. It reminds me of an old chairman of mine used to say, Declan, revenue is for vanity, profit is for sanity. And so, what he was saying was, he said, just don't talk to me. I'm not interested in revenue. I'm interested in the profit, because there can be sales.
He's taking it one step further.
Well, yeah, because obviously there can be sales that are not profitable and there can be sales that are very profitable, but ultimately the profitability will dictate not the revenue, because the revenue can very often be hiding unless you've got an awful lot of control over your margins, and you're not going any kind of discounting, etc., etc. So that's just something that always stuck in my head from 20 years ago. So let's talk about just 2 or 3 last questions, Rachel.
Yep.
Let's just talk about the building blocks of an ABM program. Whether it's the ICP, the account selection, the value prop, intent data that you mentioned, obviously the sixth sense, etc., all the way through to the account experience that you actually put the account through. Where do you spend most of your time, or a large proportion of your time?
I've always despised all those sales managers I had that when we spend time talking, all they do is, what's your pipeline? We all have the same damn report. Why the fuck are we talking about the same shit that all of us have visibility into? So what I'm trying to say is, I of course spend a lot of time looking at numbers, but numbers for numbers' sake is not going to drive improvement from the team. And because teamwork is so critical to the success of our regional numbers is one part, but if the number, I'm not worried, and I don't spend all my time thinking about, are we hitting our goal? Are we hitting? That's not productive in my opinion. Where I spend a lot of my time is, hey, what are the programs that we're all focused on for this quarter? Are there any new ideas that we can incorporate for the upcoming quarter? Are there new things that we should be trying maybe a year from now? And then just kind of jotting those things down, depending on, because sometimes timing matter, right? You can have a great idea, but if we don't have bandwidth in any way, shape, or form, it's like we're not going to execute on that. So I spend a lot of time actually thinking about what's happening this quarter, what's happening next quarter, so that I can be 2 to 3 steps ahead in executing on tactics. There is an element of strategy that's important, but tactics are super important too, because tactics are so fast. When you execute it, is this going to work or is it not going to work? And I think we can use tactics to back into strategy. We may have people with great, grand ideas, and when you test it, they don't work. So I spent a lot of time looking at actually what are the tactics that we're deploying this quarter, what are the tactics that we are likely deploying in the upcoming quarter. And in my one-on-ones with the Dimension leadership, or even in a team call, is really thinking about, okay, hey, this is going well. Do we want to repeat? That's going well. Hey, how do we think about that? So I'll give you an example. Latam, giant region. We started out thinking, let's do yerba mate. That's fun, but yerba mate is very Argentinian. Not a lot of, I guess it takes a special group of people to really enjoy yerba. When I talk to people, they either kind of like it or they just hate it. But that did pretty decent for our ABM programs. And someone new from the Latam regional marketing team joined, and he told us, he says, hey, I'm Brazilian. Brazilians don't really drink yerba, but you guys have a soccer ABM kit. So why don't we test that for Latam? And we tested that and it's working. So now that is like, okay, how do we maybe use that and integrate it across different programs that we have that's maybe upcoming? So I mean, that's all my long-winded way of saying I'm always thinking of programs and tactics. What are we doing? Sorry, I don't know what's going on. Why is it so loud all of a sudden? Do you hear it?
No.
Oh, someone outside is doing some lawn mowing. But anyway, that's all my long-winded way of saying I spend time looking at numbers, but that's not my number one part, because I know when my team or all the other teams that I'm collaborating with are moving in a same direction, we're going to hit our numbers. I'm not worried about that. I'm more concerned about what are some new things that we're testing. Are we testing new things, or are we doing the same thing over and over again, hoping for better results? Because that's just insane. It's not going to work. How else do we, on the ABM side, how do we collaborate with different organizations? So right now, one of my biggest team that I want to incorporate a lot of ABM stuff with is the developer marketing team. So I spent a lot of time with them thinking, hey, what are your plans for your upcoming quarter? Here are some things that we're thinking about. How can we marry our ideas together? That's where I spent a lot of my time.
So it's pretty analytical actually in terms of the emphasis of your time there, which actually is really a lot of ABM is very kind of, I like to think that ABMers are, they're salespeople, they're commercial people, they're data scientists, they're number crunchers, because there's an awful lot of data to go through, which kind of separates, from, in my head, ABM from other marketing disciplines really. Two last questions, Rachel. I'm not sure whether I'm going to spring this on you, but I'll ask the question anyway. What's been your biggest mistake with your ABM program? Because obviously ABM, I kind of call it a journey, an ABM journey. And on a journey, you take a wrong turn, you kind of come back on the path, you kind of get some blisters or whatever. But what's been that mistake that you've learned from and said, you know what, I'm glad that happened, but it's helped me to be better?
Yeah, I would say the first thing that popped in my head was when I thought of ABM, again, coming from a sales background, we're very lone wolves. So for me, even with my team, it's me, myself, and my team. Big mistake. Because you're singling yourself out. Not only that, you're singling your entire team out, right? Target accounts are important, but don't forget the total addressable market is way bigger than your sliver of target accounts. So collaborating. So when we were super focused on target accounts, that was just, target accounts. And that made me feel like, oh my gosh, that shrunk our playground, and that shrunk a lot of our creativity. That also singled us out from having collaborative efforts with all of marketing. So that's that I would call it, that's the first thing. I don't know if anyone has experienced that before. It's like what you mentioned earlier, right? They're so focused on the data crunching, and there is a place for that. I mean, I spend a lot of time also looking at 6 Sense data. But what good is your data if you can't use that to mobilize teams and move the team towards one big, gigantic, audacious goal? And that requires psychology and relationship building. So that was my first thing that I was like, damn, I'm shooting myself in my damn foot. Not just one foot, both feet. No, not two foot.
So basically, you're now walking down the road. You've got both bullets in both feet, and you're still trying to. But I think us ABMers, we are quite pig-headed, very strong-willed. We just keep going until the end, as you said. And what would you get a phone call, on a Friday night, and from an ex-colleague or whatever, and they say, "Hey, Rachel, I've just joined a new company. I'm going to be implementing an ABM program, and I need a little bit of advice." What would be that one piece of advice that you'd give them?
I would say, don't think about your ABM programs. Figure out what your peers, your colleagues are doing, and then ask yourself, where can you add value from the perspective of ABM? I think a lot of times people think of ABM as a team. You can. I mean, sometimes I even try to talk myself out of a job at Auth0. Like I tell my boss, I'm like, and the dimension leadership, I said, I don't see why there should be a role for me. Because ABM in itself is not, you can hire people, it's a team. And we have also evolved even further and changing into a center of excellence. But ABM is an approach, it's a mindset, and it's also a program style which you can integrate across any function, from developer marketing to running digital ads to hosting your own events, joining events, growth, chat bots. Like, yeah, that's one thing, is like, don't think about your program. First things first, learn what your peers are doing, understand what's working. Then you ask yourself, okay, what's the opportunity for us to then put on the lens of, okay, we know your persona types. We know what are the challenges that your product can solve. How can we curate to a very special group of people that, as you mentioned moments ago, show me that you know me? Because by nature, events are very broad-based. And by nature, ABM tends to be more narrow. So how do you then partner with your events team and say, hey, let's divide and conquer? We know that out of this 200 list of accounts are attending this event, 50 of them are aligned super well with our ICP. Where can I step in? Here are some of my ideas. Let's go. So that's what I would recommend. Yeah. Great
answer, actually. And it coincides with some other Let's Talk ABM guests that have said something very similar around you need to kind of spread ABM out across the business. And obviously you can have a central team that can be the guardians of ABM, but the real magic happens when it gets pushed out into the field marketing team and it gets pushed out to the sales team, and everyone can then pull on that ABM expertise, but they've basically been, almost trained how to do ABM themselves. But I mean, I would hate, Rachel, for you to be out of a job because you're doing such an amazing job there at Auth0. So we'll cut this bit out of the podcast because we don't want people to be thinking that you're redundant and not and irrelevant, and you have. So I want to keep seeing your great work and keep looking out for you on LinkedIn and seeing all the great work you're doing. So on that point, Rachel, thank you for being so generous with your time, for sharing your ABM journey, and for giving us an insight into all the great work you're doing, and all the best for the future.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun, and appreciate you being very patient and persistent, professionally persistent. It's been fun, and I do invite anyone who's got ideas that are different. Please, I'm sure Declan is going to share my ways to reach me. Would love to hear from you guys as well, and if there's anything I can do to help you as well, Declan, let me know.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rachel. If you enjoyed this episode of Let's Talk ABM, be sure to subscribe so you're notified when a new episode is posted. Feel free to rate and review this podcast. Thanks so much for listening.